This is the story of how Nepal's Gen Z rose, why the government tried to silence them, and what the fallout means for the country and the region. Nepal is a small, landlocked country between India and China. Its young population makes up nearly half the country. Over the years, frustration has grown over corruption, unemployment, and weak governance. Social media has become one of the few tools where young people can voice their concerns, share information, and build movements. But on September 5th, the government abruptly announced a nationwide ban on more than 24 social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Officials claimed the move was needed to stop fake accounts, misinformation, and hate speech. For many young people, this was the last straw. Almost immediately, protests broke out in the capital, Kathmandu, and spread to other cities. Students, activists, and ordinary young people poured into the streets. They demanded not just the return of social media, but also deeper reforms, accountability, job creation, and an end to corruption. The demonstrations quickly escalated. Protesters tried to march toward the federal parliament building. Security forces responded with tear gas, rubber bullets, and even live ammunition. At first, the demonstrations looked like so many others. Students waving placards, young people chanting slogans, gatherings around university gates. But by September 8th, everything changed. That afternoon, police opened fire on protesters in the capital. 20 people were killed, among them a 12-year-old child and a college student. Hospitals were overwhelmed as bodies arrived alongside the wounded. For many, that moment turned grief into fury. The images that define these September days are seared into memory. Smoke billowing from Parliament, teenagers carrying the wounded on makeshift stretchers, a child's school bag lying abandoned in the street. They tell the story of a generation that, for better or worse, has declared war on silence. The very next morning, September 9th, protests erupted with a new and frightening intensity, not just in Kathmandu or Lalitpur, but across cities and villages nationwide. Ordinary citizens poured into the streets. "We couldn't stay quiet after they shot children," said 18-year-old protester Sabina Rai, standing outside a smoldering government building. This is no longer about apps. It's about our lives. Crowds began targeting symbols of authority. Politicians' homes were attacked, and some were burned to the ground. In several districts, enraged youths dragged officials from their residences, beating them in the streets. The Parliament building and the Supreme Court complex were set ablaze. Ministers' quarters were set on fire. In one incident, 4 police officers were beaten to death. By then, the government was crumbling. Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli had already announced his resignation amid the escalating bloodshed, admitting in a somber address that he could no longer govern. His departure, however, did little to calm the anger. Many saw it as too little, too late. "This uprising belongs to the young," said activist Milan Tamang, his voice hoarse from days of shouting. "They killed our brothers and sisters. They killed a child. How do we forgive that?" For years, Nepal's youth have carried simmering frustration. They make up nearly half the country's population, but feel they have little stake in its politics. They've grown up watching corruption scandals and revolving door governments, while unemployment and migration abroad climbed higher. Social media gave them not only a voice, but also a community, a way to organize and hold leaders accountable. When the government tried to silence that, it sparked an anger that could no longer be contained. Now, Nepal stands at a breaking point. Streets remain under curfew. Nepal Army has taken control of the whole country. At 10 p.m., soldiers patrol burned out government compounds, and an official investigation panel has been announced, yet few trust of the promises. Protest leaders are demanding not only justice for those killed, but a complete restructuring of the political system, one they see as rotten to its core. What makes these protests historic is not just the violence, but who was leading them. This was a Gen Z movement. Young people in their late teens and 20s, many of them students or recent graduates. For years, Nepal's youth have felt excluded from politics. They've grown up watching corruption scandals, frequent government changes, and little progress on jobs or education. Social media gave them a sense of voice and community, so when the government tried to take that away, it struck a nerve. What followed was more than a protest about apps. It was a cry for dignity, accountability, and a future they could believe in. The uprising also highlights a global trend. From Hong Kong to Iran to Chile, young people are using digital tools to challenge systems they see as broken. Nepal is now part of that story. The roots run deep. Nepali youth, confronting corruption and nepotism, took inspiration from regional movements, from Bangladesh to Indonesia, demanding justice and dignity. Social media was their tool. Its ban was the tipping point. This crisis exposed deep fractures in Nepal's political system. The government's handling of the protests, from censorship to lethal force, only intensified public anger. The youth want sweeping reforms, transparent governance, accountability, and opportunities. What happens next in Nepal is uncertain. But one thing is clear, the voices of its young people are louder than ever before, and the world is listening.